Welcome everyone. My name is Sean, and today we have to talk about this guy, an Innocence Project ambassador, a criminal justice reformer, a supposedly reformed criminal himself, being arrested with overwhelming evidence for murder after he was released early on a 50-year sentence. And the reason this has become so notable, other than the fact that he is an activist that has been seen pictured with District Attorney Alvin Bragg and been promoting the criminal justice reforms of DA Alvin Bragg, is because on February 1st, just last month, he did an appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience with one of these scumbags from the Innocence Project, the Innocence Fraud Project, Josh Dubin, and he was presented as this reformed person who didn't deserve the harsh sentence that he actually got. And to be clear, based on his initial crimes that he was initially convicted for, he definitely did. It was a mistake to release this person 30 years early, and now somebody's died because we all wanted to pretend that this criminal was some innocent angel, victim of circumstances, kind of like Aladdin when you think about it, who was just a thief and a criminal with a heart of gold. Now, we're going to get into this. I'm going to go over this point by point by point. But before we do, thank you to everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And yes, I will be in Austin, Texas at the Vulcan Gas Company. It's a theater on April 27th for the Minds Fest. Link to tickets in the description of this video.
This is my my friend, my client, my brother, Sheldon Johnson. I figured we'd do something a little bit different. Typically, the person sitting to my right is someone that was wrongfully convicted. So I don't want to bury the headline. Sheldon is guilty. And I thought it would be a real interesting conversation to learn his background, learn about his upbringing, learn about the crime that he committed, and hear the sentence he got, which I don't want to shade it and inject my opinion. I have a strong one, but it's pretty astounding.
Now, it is very important for everyone out there in the audience to understand right off the bat that the Innocence Project, from its inception, is a fraud. It is quite literally founded by one of the attorneys that represented O.J. Simpson in his murder trial, where he was found not guilty. And as we've gone over multiple different times, they worked tirelessly to release obviously guilty people by manufacturing propaganda campaigns with evidence not fit for court. And it is truly disgusting the way that they're operating. In fact, one of their more famous cases, the original cases that they got somebody released on a death penalty murder charge in Florida, they recently pushed for DNA testing of that evidence because they used some nonsensical procedural violations in order to get him off, and the DNA testing affirmed that that guy was guilty. I did an entire video on this. You can watch that specific case for yourself, and this has happened time and time again.
I know I've said this before, and it probably sounds repetitive, but another miracle sitting to my right, just like a marvelous human being who was basically told by a judge, by an African-American judge, that you don't matter, you don't count, and I'm going to throw your life away for a crime in which the victim received 2 stitches, and on a second offense, his first offense being a gun possession charge. So I will say this, that he received a sentence that far eclipses a sentence that would be commonly doled out for murder or manslaughter. So with that, here's Sheldon.
Sheldon, how long you been out for?
Going on 9 months. I got out May 4th.
And you were in for 25?
25 years and 5 months.
For 2 stitches.
2 stitches.
And Joe Rogan, unfortunately, like many people in our country, have bought into the lies of the Innocence Project, and he's actually pledged to have this guy called Josh Dubin on his podcast at least 4 times a year to go over these false narratives related to this case. So then they decide that they're going to bring this Sheldon Johnson guy, somebody who was convicted, who acknowledges to some extent that he did the crime.
I was just blown away by the level of accomplishment and the mental wherewithal that he possessed to accomplish what he did while incarcerated. And then the path he's taken in the 8 months since he's been out is, we talk about on these episodes, how do you make change happen? He's living it and making it happen. So I thought it would be just fascinating to go through Like I said, his life. I trip out when people are like, anybody that murders or robs or does it, lock them up and throw away the key. I always feel like, well, look, why don't you explain to me how you have gotten to know somebody that has been brought up in different conditions than you were? How long have you sat and listened to them? How long have you considered how that might have impacted them and compared it to the conditions you grew up in? How many people like him have you gotten to know? So again, I'm trying to walk a fine line between sounding preachy and just saying, let's just consider the circumstances in which he was born.
To show everybody out there in the audience who thinks that violent criminals should be locked up for long periods of time, that they're actually wrong, that violent criminals are actually the victims, they're actually innocent angels with hearts of gold, and in reality, in actuality, the real problem is racism in our criminal justice system. And when you listen to this podcast and you realize how much he's lying in this podcast, even though he acknowledges he was guilty of the crimes he was convicted of, you realize how insane this actually is, and how obviously, and I mean obviously, this was not a reformed individual. I mean, some of these clips are absolutely chilling, like this one.
And when I got out, I made a decision that I was going to walk away. And I didn't care about what the consequences was. And I said to myself, I've been doing bad for so long, I'm going to try to do something good. If all else fails, I could always go back to doing bad. But let me try. Let me give it a shot.
Because that's exactly what he did. But one of the things that I want to highlight is the number of times that the criminal justice system is accused of being full of evil white racists, even though in this particular case, you actually had a black judge who used all of the enhancements to lock this person away for up to 50 years and throw away the key, even though our justice system was subverted in order to let him out, because theoretically, this guy was totally reformed, even though clearly he wasn't.
How he got to where he was, why he got this, what his thoughts are and our thoughts are on the sentence he received, why that happens too often to people of color. And I know there's one thing I want to say, and then I'm going to shut up and really let Sheldon talk and you talk. I get this a lot. Why are you always bringing up race when you talk about the system? You have to confront it. It's there. Is it that all people that get wrongfully convicted are people of color? No, but most of them. Is it that all people of color get disparate sentences? Oh, absolutely.
We have to fix this. This is a problem that's been going on for decades and decades, back through Jim Crow, back all the way to slavery, the same communities, and we don't do anything?
Pull that a little closer.
Redlining, everything.
Pull that mic up a little bit.
Yeah, just yeah, it's good.
That's good?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's wild. It really is wild. And, and the race part of it is a major factor. It's a major factor. And it's a factor that gets ignored when people start talking about racism, systemic racism in the country. Talk about sentencing. How come that's not talked about?
Yeah, well, that's a vestige of slavery, segregation,
Jim Crow, redlining, everything.
Exercising your right to a jury trial, being punished twice.
And the twist on Sheldon's story that it's like a head scratcher to me that I asked him about was the judge that sentenced him is a black man. And, I said to Sheldon, did that ever strike you as, here's an African-American judge that looks at this young black kid and should understand his circumstances and have a better understanding of it and not want to throw away his life. And I said, so what do you do with that fact? And Sheldon said, well, I'll let you respond to it because he said something to me that I didn't really, this judge now, sits as a federal judge in the Southern District of New York. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know. It just seems so strange to me that is who, said this guy's not worthy of redemption.
And I think it goes back even farther than that, right? When you go back all the way into slavery, you had the house and the field. Excuse my language for using those words, right?
You could use them, we can't.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying? And that the idea of the guy who was in the house, he was harder on his own people, his fellow slaves, than some of the overseers may have been, or the slave masters.
Yeah, that's right. This guy who's proudly wearing a Queen's Defender shirt on this appearance with Joe Rogan, who is supposedly reformed, supposedly has taken accountability for his actions, says that the judge who sentenced him and used all of the appropriate enhancements that definitely should have stuck for him was actually somebody equivalent to a House N-word back in slavery times who was enforcing evil white racism against him. But here's the thing. Sheldon doesn't only misconstrue the judge in this particular case, he lies about everything. When he talks about the crimes that he committed, what he actually got charged with, or what he actually did, it is ridiculous and absurd, and you should be able to tell right away that he's lying. And honestly, it's embarrassing for Joe Rogan to just platform this without pushing back with any serious questions. I also want to add, the reason I'm saying it's not embarrassing for the Innocence Project is because this is what they do. They advocate for guilty people. Again, they're based on an attorney who represented O.J. Simpson and manufacturing propaganda campaigns rather than actually getting innocent people out of prison.
I need my money. It's just me being honest. It's just me being straight. You know, I gave you something, and we had an understanding that you were going to pay me. And when I came home, when I finally located this particular individual, he had his girlfriend with him. And this guy owed me $5,000 for some drugs that I had gave him on consignment. I gave him an eighth of a kilo, which is 125 grams of cocaine. And when I saw him, he had a bunch of jewelry on. He was with his girlfriend. She had a bunch of jewelry on. I said, hey, man, where's my money at? Oh, yo, I was going to pay you. And as far as I was concerned, his jewelry we was even. So I robbed him. And I took his jewelry. And his girlfriend happened to be there. And unfortunately, she got caught up in the situation. I had a bunch of young guys with me, and they robbed her as well. And he got hit in the head with the gun right here on the side of his head, and he had 2 stitches. And they gave me 25 years for that case.
So let me be clear. Despite what Sheldon Johnson says right here, he was convicted of attempted murder. The reason he got 50 years is because he was a high-level member of the Blood Gang, which, by the way, he acknowledges in bits and pieces throughout the course of this podcast.
I was Blood. I was a gang member. This is where the cut comes from on my face. I have a bunch of stab marks from just being in those environments and being on Rikers Island and just warring with other rival gangs, mostly Latin Kings and Inetas. And I would just stand there, and eventually I just slowly moved up the ranks, and I became this person that I feel like I was never meant to be, but because of the conditions and because of where I was at and because of what I saw, what I was exposed to, made me into someone else.
He had a long history of repeat offenses and was clearly and obviously a danger to society. But the way that Sheldon Johnson tells his story, these things just sort of happened to his victims. He just sort of happened to approach the victim, who owed him money, by the way, so it was kind of justified. And he just happened to be with his girlfriend, and he robbed him. And during the course of that robbery, somehow, the guy happened to be hit in the head with the pistol. And by the way, for the other crime, because he was convicted of this twice, he got 2 25-year sentences. That also just seemed to happen, but don't worry, nobody got hurt.
Another guy that I ran into, he also owed me some money. He owed me $7,000, and it kind of went along the same ways. He was selling drugs out of an auto parts store. He was a Spanish guy. I got word that this is where he was at, and he was selling drugs, and I was going to get my money. And the same circumstances kind of ensued. Saw him, hey, what's going on? You know, reading in between the lines and outside the margins without really going into all of the details, I robbed him because he owed me $7,000.
Did he get physically hurt?
No.
Even though they were just roughed up a little bit.
Reading in between the lines and outside the margins without really going into all of the details, I robbed him because he owed me $7,000.
Did he get physically hurt?
No. He didn't get touched. Got roughed up a little bit, but there was no physical harm, nothing. Going back to morals and values and principles, right? In my mind, he was fair game.
Now, look, I'm not someone who believes that people can't be reformed. I'm not somebody who believes that people cannot change their ways. But does that sound like somebody who's reformed? Does that sound like someone who's taking responsibility? There are a million red flags in this particular podcast right here that shows that this guy is not only a danger back then, not only not reformed, but would obviously continue to be a danger into the future. And if I were a judge looking at this, which, by the way, a New York judge did look at this, I would understand this, I would know the history, and I would push for sentence enhancements in order to keep this guy locked up. And one of the funniest parts of this particular podcast, unintentionally hilarious, is from Joe Rogan, where he says, is anybody examining the sentences that people give?
You know, one of the things that's happened through all of our conversations that we've had on the show is it highlights how insanely broken the criminal justice system is and how little oversight there is and how few people are looking at these individual cases, and that you can have one judge who does what they did to you and no one's looking. No one cares. No one pays attention. And until someone like you goes in.
Why don't we have checks on judges to make sure they're just not going crazy, especially what you told me earlier, Sheldon, about the judge being a house N-word and that likely being the reason why you got such a harsh sentence. And to be clear, to answer that question, Mr. Joe Rogan, the people who are examining this, the people who are looking at the totality of circumstances, the people who are overseeing the history of the person, they're called judges. They use judgment, and in this case, the judge was absolutely dead on accurate. He says at some point in this podcast, Sheldon Johnson, that the judge said something really mean and really hurtful to him, but considering this guy was just charged with murder, and we have surveillance video evidence, and by the way, when I give you the gruesome details of that murder, you tell me if this judge is wrong in this assessment.
And I remember when I went and got sentenced, and the judge said 50 years. Now, mind you, I had a black lawyer, a black judge, and a white prosecutor. And I remember when he said 50 years. He said he went into all of these reasons why he was sentencing me the way that he was sentencing me. There was never no they're supposed to do a report prior to your sentencing, and it's called a post-supervision interview. Pre-sentencing investigation. It's called a PSI, pre-sentencing investigation. There was never no pre-sentencing investigation. There was never no mitigating evidence presented on my behalf to, highlight why I may have made some of the decisions that I made. And he just called me a menace to society, and he gave me 50 years.
The judge right there was 100% right. Obviously, the judge right there reviewed all the circumstances, in case you're concerned about that, Joe Rogan, and he decided that a 50-year sentence was appropriate because this was somebody who had no remorse. He was psychopathic, and that is why, again, even though he was released in 2019, even though he's been uplifted by organizations like the Innocence Project, even though he had a stable job, all of the things that Joe Rogan says are the things that are the root causes of criminality.
It's broken. I mean, it's so broken, and it seems so overwhelmed, and the root cause of it is never addressed. The root cause of, I've said it ad nauseum, but I'll say it again. Where the f- did we come up with $100 and whatever billion to send to Ukraine, and we don't have any money to try to do something about these insanely impoverished, crime-ridden, gang-ridden, drug-ridden communities? We don't do anything? We have nothing? I mean, this is my take on this whole Make America Great Again thing. You want to make America great again? Make it so there's less losers. Make it so that more people have a fucking chance.
The fact of the matter is, this guy was a criminal. This guy was a thug. He was violent before. He had a pattern of history of violence in his past, and he was going to be violent again, and we wanted to prevent him from being able to do so because his past history, according to the judge's judgment, was a good predictor of future outcome. But, maybe we could have given him more welfare in order to compensate for these problems.
And you end up making really, really bad decisions that can cost you for the rest of your life. Like my son, when he got into a fight with an Asian guy. They called him the Columbia law student killer, right? He gets into a fight with this Chinese guy, and this is not to take away anything from that man's family. And as a man, as his father, I felt some type of way. But the guy goes into the street and gets hit by a car, and he dies. But this is how fast your life can change from just one simple mistake.
When I say that Sheldon Johnson doesn't take any responsibility for his actions, a perfect example of that is what he just said right there, having to do with his son, because he just told you that his son, who is the Columbia law student killer, got into a fight with a Chinese guy, and that guy ended up in the street and he got hit by a car. His son was 14 at the time. 14-year-old black kids do not get into fights with Columbia grad students from China. That's never happened in the history of ever. What happened was his son attacked that guy. He walked up to him in a group of friends, sucker punched him from behind, and then he stumbled into the street and got hit. Don't believe me? He's admitted it. The 14-year-old at the time said that they were going to go get Chinese food, but then they wanted to mess around with people, and they decided to attack this guy. Then he got hit by an SUV, and they fled the scene. So his 14-year-old was better at taking responsibility for his own damn actions than Sheldon is in describing it on the Joe Rogan podcast at age 48. And again, Joe, you have Jamie, your producer, who Googles the crap out of everything. You can't look into that. That doesn't sound suspicious, doesn't sound weird. Columbia grad student studying statistics, by the way, not law, gets into a fight with a 14-year-old black kid, and you buy that story? Are you kidding me? Now, the reason I'm so mad about this is because I've worked tirelessly exposing the Innocence Project, taking whatever case of the day that they put forward completely apart, showing you their assertions versus the actual evidence that was produced in trial, and trying to expose them, but their grip on American society seems to only grow because in the name and all the propaganda that they get and all the money that they get, they just seem to be able to shake off any criticism or any controversy. And this is a perfect example of that. They haven't even acknowledged this, nor will they. And even if they do, it won't ever change their pattern of behavior. They got an innocence fraud ambassador on Rogan 4 times a year talking about how this guy's his brother. And yet, does anybody believe that this guy isn't going to trot out another brutal criminal a month later, 2 months later, talk about how much he loves him and how related to him he is and how, oh my God, this guy's the victim of society? And then you have Joe Rogan saying that we need to arrest poverty. The real issue is that this guy didn't get enough welfare from the system, and if only we loaded up these bad neighborhoods with welfare, that would solve these particular issues. Well, this guy was being propped up, he had a paying job, all of this stuff, supposedly he was reformed, yet he still committed a murder against somebody that he knew from his criminal lifestyle because he was a criminal through and through. That's who he is. He was violent, and the judge was dead on accurate about it. From the New York Post, Sheldon Johnson, a 48-year-old staffer for the public law firm the Queen's Defenders, was let out of the 44th Precinct Station House in handcuffs Thursday after police made a grisly discovery: a human torso in a blue bin and a head stashed in a freezer in the 6th floor of an apartment, police said. Now, we have surveillance videos of this guy dragging out the bin when this person was alive who was killed inside, leaving afterwards. He tried using a blonde wig, all of these different things in order to cover up this crime. So again, even though this murder is alleged based on the fact that he is an attempted murderer and we have all this evidence, I'd say it's a pretty good case against him. Although who knows, maybe the Innocence Project will say, oh, what about his poor sad life? You know, he could have been Aladdin. Oh, the criminal justice system just came down so hard against him based on his consistent violent behavior. Also, we're going to downplay what he did, that he was convicted of attempted murder, pretend it was only a robbery, and talk about how the victims just happened to have these things happen to them, not this leader of the Bloods attacked him with a crew and almost killed them. That's why they're charged with attempted murder. Now, sources said the victim in this week's slaying is identified as 44-year-old Colin Small, may have had beef with Johnson while both were doing time back at Sing Sing, a prison in Westchester County, a prison where he should have stayed, by the way. Neighbors told cops the victim was heard desperately pleading with his killer shortly before 2 shots rang out in the apartment near Ogden Avenue and West 162nd Street shortly after 8 p.m. Tuesday, sources and neighbors said. Please don't, the Dune man was heard saying, I have a family. Yeah, that's right. That's Sheldon Johnson, this innocent angel, this victim of circumstances, this victim of evil white racism, not just perpetrated against him by white people, but by black people like the black judge who nailed it on that judgment, killing somebody as they begged for their life, talked about how they had a family. That's who this man is. That's who he always was. That's why we try to lock him up for 50 years up until somebody got him out years earlier and he became an ambassador for the Innocence Project.
You know, kudos to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for actually, you know, paying attention and seeing that Sheldon was worthy of a second chance, and really the sentence did not fit the crime.
Investigators were first called to the building for wellness check after the shots were heard, and neighbors reported seeing a stranger coming and going from the apartment with cleaning supplies, the building superintendent said. We also have surveillance video of Johnson going to and from the apartment. The chilling surveillance video footage obtained by the Post shows Johnson stepping off the 6th floor elevator on Tuesday, looking around cautiously before he slowly walks to the apartment inside. He was seen wearing a dark coat over a yellow hoodie, lugging a mop and a bag that sources said was full of cleaning supplies. Johnson is also seen carrying a blue bin into the apartment at 2 a.m. and never brought it back out. Now, by the way, they found body parts in that blue bin that you see Johnson having. So even though this is alleged, and we got to be fair to Johnson because he's the victim of evil white racism, to be clear, it's pretty obvious that this will be proven true. And again, maybe next time we should send him up the river for much, much longer. Now, I know that's going to upset Josh Dubin, who says, oh, you guys just need to talk to this individual. You just need to have a conversation. And then you'll realize, geez, golly gee, he's such a sweet, swell guy. The super also witnessed the suspect leaving in the victim's blue Audi and returning from an Uber in a blonde wig, which, by the way, is hilarious. Now, you guys can read this article linked in the description. However, I will point out that this article improperly takes information from the Joe Rogan Experience, saying that Johnson was only convicted of robberies before, not going into the fact that he was charged and convicted of attempted murder before, and he definitely should have been held for the entirety of those 50 years, and now somebody is dead due to that fact. But this is absolutely crucial for you guys out there in the audience. These people in this neighborhood, they reported how calm he was, how chill he was, how much in control he was of his personality and whatnot as he was dismembering this body, as he was doing this heinous crime. This is somebody with absolutely no remorse. And by the way, that came through incredibly strongly on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Talk about change and to talk about all of the things that brought me to this place today. And you know, the conditions in which I grew up and, you know, how social conditions play a role in the decisions that we make or the lack of achievements or opportunities, like Joe just said a couple of minutes ago. You know, those opportunities are very important, and being able to start that line where everybody is not necessarily equitable, but, you know, everybody has that same opportunity.
You have a chance.
You have a chance.
Yeah.
A real chance.
And more importantly, it came through to the judge at the time that he was convicted and sentenced for 50 years. And I'm so tired of hearing about these struggles of these criminals. Unlike Johnson, who deserved his 50-year sentence, when I was 12 years old, I was actually wrongfully arrested in front of my school a week after I was thrown out of the place I was living by a relative who had a mental illness, who had an episode, so I was actually recently homeless. Now, luckily, through the help of friends, we found a place to live. But point being, my mother was expected to shell out thousands upon thousands of dollars after she just did first and security deposit on a new apartment. And when the supposed victim at my trial testified that I neither assaulted nor robbed him, I thought the case was over, but they just changed my charges to attempted assault and attempted robbery, and were still pursuing a sentence that would have seen me locked up in juvenile hall until I was 21. Now, I luckily beat the charges, but I found out after the fact that that group of kids, the ones who were attacked in that particular incident, they were robbing other people, and the guy who attacked them did so because they took something that belonged to his little brother. But when I was arrested, because so many kids at my middle school were being robbed, a bunch of parents assumed that I was responsible for it, so they were calling into the district attorney, basically telling them to crush me, and that's why the district attorney offered no plea deal and was pursuing the maximum sentence. And even when the case fell apart, she just revised the charges slightly and continued to pursue that sentence. Now, unlike Sheldon, I was innocent and that happened to me. So what does that get me in our current criminal justice system? What does that sad, sad life and the impact on my family financially allow me to do? What rules can I break? What crimes can I commit? How many people can I attack while they're with their girlfriend because they owe me money based on a drug deal? How many attempted murders can I get get away with committing? How many murders do I get to have based on that sad story from my childhood? This is what really pisses me off. If something like that happens to you, it is on you to overcome those circumstances. It is not on you to blame everybody else, play victim when you've become a victimizer. I don't give a damn about the cycle of violence. It is your job to break that cycle, and Sheldon Johnson showed absolutely no interest in doing so. And the fact of the matter is, his feigned responsibility taking, which he didn't even do by his words, allowed him to get released early, and now somebody is dead.
I left the gangs alone, which was a benefit for them because, you know, I was what you call an authoritarian. I was a rule guy. I'm still a rule guy. I like rules. You know, I like rules. I like structure. I like things to be a certain way. And it was to their advantage to get rid of me anyway. Plus, I knew a lot of the guys who were at the top.
Why was it to their advantage to get rid of you?
Because I was the type of person who would say, you doing that for what reason? Nah, you can't do that. The rule says that you can't do this, you can't do this. This is what the rules say. And
The rules of the prison or the rules,
the rules
of the streets?
gang. The rules of the
gang.
street. Yeah, there was rules.
Give us a for instance.
Okay, so for instance, I could be in a whole nother facility. Let's say I'm in Greenhaven and a guy's in Attica, and they want to do something to him because they feel like he's not sharing his proceeds of drugs that he's bringing into the facility. The rules say you can't do that. That's his property. That's his belongings. So I was a rule guy, and they just, you know, it was to their advantage to get me out of the way. So when I decided to take a step back, they were like, yes.
This guy doesn't act like a career criminal who was at the top level of the Bloods. So scary that other Blood members were afraid of him because of his rigid enforcement of the gang rules on all of its members.
As far as I was concerned, his jury was even. So I robbed him, and I took his jury. And his girlfriend happened to be there, and unfortunately, she got caught up in the situation. I had a bunch of young guys with me, and they robbed her as well. And he got hit in the head with the gun right here on the side of his head, and he got 2 stitches. And they gave me 25 years for that case.
He acts like his crimes were natural disasters that happened to happen near him. Like, oh, something happened. Oh, they got roughed up. Oh, they were struck at some point in time by the butt end of a firearm and all of that. Oh, it's just circumstances, honestly. And ain't I the real victim, Joe? Thank you for having me on this show, Joe Rogan. Thank you for fawning over me throughout the whole course of this segment. Did I ever tell you that I'd never been on a plane in my whole life until I flew down for this podcast?
But you know, it's crazy because Sheldon and I are the same exact age, and we didn't know that until we were on our way down.
Born days apart.
Yep. And he flew when we flew down. It was the first time he'd ever been on an airplane.
Oh my God, such a poor life. Joe, can you talk about the welfare that I should have gotten? Can you explain that to me, that I needed more welfare from the United States government and maybe I wouldn't have been such a scumbag? Ridiculous. And by the way, when he had all the power, when it mattered the most, when it was in his hands, when he had a gun pointed at somebody who was begging for his life, when he had the opportunity to make a good choice, what did he do? What did he do in that moment when he had all the power, all the control over that situation? He pulled the trigger not once, but twice. And then in a cold, calculated manner, he proceeded to clean up the crime scene. He proceeded to hack up the body. He proceeded to store it so it wouldn't smell. This is who he is. This is who he's always been. And this is why he got a 50-year sentence. And the reason I'm so angry about this particular case is because a lot of people are going to say, oh, you know what? This is a one-off. The Innocence Project, they just bungled it. Josh Dubin, he's just a swell guy who loves so hard. But guess what? It's not a one-off. This is what the Innocence Project is all about. Painting criminals as the victims, smearing the family members of victims, by the way. They do that too in their disgusting actions, and papering over all the different crimes and harms, minimizing what actually happened, augmenting reality in order to serve their agenda, and they have legitimate influence. This guy is photographed with District Attorney Alvin Bragg. I'm somebody who is a law-abiding citizen. I actually make a good income with this platform that I built for myself. I can't get a picture with Alvin Bragg. Absolutely not. But here they are, shaking hands. Sheldon Johnson, the career criminal who should have never been let out in the first place, and Fat Albert, the guy who's supposed to be prosecuting criminals like him, but actually goes to bat for them each and every time.
You know, kudos to the Manhattan District Attorney's
Absolutely.
Office
Thank you.
for actually, you know, paying attention and seeing that Sheldon was worthy of a second chance, and really the sentence did not fit the crime.
So yeah, it is a huge problem, but it's beyond Sheldon Johnson. These are the consequences of our changing culture around criminal justice. These are the consequences when we stop blaming the individual for their own actions and stop expecting better behavior from them and start blaming the systemic systems and start talking about, oh, the evil white racism that goes all the way back to slavery.
How he got to where he was, why he got this, what his thoughts are and our thoughts are on the sentence he received. Why that happens too often to people of color. And I know there's one thing I want to say, and then I'm going to shut up and really let Sheldon talk and you talk. I get this a lot. Why are you always bringing up race when you talk about the system? You have to confront it. It's there. Is it that all people that get wrongfully convicted are people of color? No, but most of them. Is it that all people of color get disparate sentences? Oh, absolutely.
And if you disagree with me, I challenge anybody out there in the audience to show me what aspect of slavery was passed down through the generations that got into Sheldon Johnson's gun that was in his hand when he shot this man in the head 2 different times. Which evil white racist figure in American history took control over his body and made him hack up this guy's body in order to dispose of it? Tell me. I can't wait to know. I really, really want to understand that argument from anybody out there in the audience who wants to argue still that this guy is just an innocent angel Aladdin. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, if you like this video, then show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about another innocence fraud ambassador being a disgusting criminal, more lies from that organization that have cost yet another person their life. Till next time.